Siamo qui a Festivaletteratura con Marcelo Figueras, che è scrittore, giornalista e sceneggiatore, qui con il suo ultimo romanzo, Aquarium, edito da L'Asino d'Oro. Let's start by talking about your experience as a journalist. When did you realize that this kind of writing wasn't enough to tell your stories?
I always wanted to write fiction, and I fell in love with literature and narrative when I was really little, but I didn't even remember a time when I didn't want to be a writer. But when I finished school, and it was during the military dictatorship in Argentina, and my parents, as the Aunt Mimi told John Lennon, well, with the guitar you're not going to eat, you're not going to earn the money to live. My parents told me, writing fiction, it's going to be difficult for you to earn a living, so I chose journalism. I never thought of going to the university to learn literature because I prefer to mix with the real world. I was more interested in the real world, and I went to the university to learn journalism, and I worked 20 years as a journalist, and I loved it. But fiction was always my first love. It was something that I knew I was going to go back to one time or another. So I did, and I still write from time to time when journalistic articles, because I think that they're not really so different. It's just narrative. The only thing that changes is that when you are writing journalism, you have to prove all the facts that you're weaving, and when you're writing fiction, you don't. But the rules of the narrative are the same. If I'm a writer, I have to seduce you as a reader. I have to lure you in. I have to present the story in the most attractive way. And so I guess it's part of the same impulse of storytelling.
Now there is another aspect of your writing that I want to investigate. When you delivered the first draft of Kamchatka, they asked you to transpose it in a script. And there is already a script version of your last novel, Aquarium. About Kamchatka, did their suggestion surprise you? What's the relationship between a narrative and screenwriting in your works?
I love fiction in all its forms, and I love narrative in all its forms, because we were talking about journalism. I love journalism too. I'm a fan of comics. I'm a fan of movies. I'm a fan of TV. I'm glad working in these different in these variations of narrative. What I like is to play. For me to create a story and to tell a story, it's a way of playing. What I like about writing a sceneggiatura is, first of all, you have very rigid rules. You have rules that you have to follow, and there's boundaries, and you have to move in that territory, because you cannot go out. When you write fiction, a novel, a short story, you can do anything. But when you write for a movie or a TV series, you're working with others. You're not creating alone. You're working with your director. You're working with your director of photography, with your art director. You're working with your actors, and this is a way of creating that I also love very much. Creating with others, going back and forth with ideas. When you tell a story and the art director says to you, what I see is this kind of colors, of this kind of shapes, and you say, oh, well, this is something new. I haven't seen this before when I thought about this story. That input enriches your story. So I like to create with others, but I also like to create alone. And I always go back and forth. I write novels and I work in cinema because I need both stages. Writing only novels, it's a very, very solitary kind of work. So after that immersion, maybe you are, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years living in a world that only exists in your head. I always welcome working in a TV project or a movie project because I like the contact with other creators.
In Kamchatka, you report the horror through the eyes of childhood. That reminds me of the little heroes in Dickens' novels, another that you admire. But unlike Dickens, you don't always give your reader a happy ending. Do you not want this kind of responsibility?
In the particular case of Kamchatka, I knew I couldn't have a happy ending because Argentinian history, at that point of its history, when I wrote Kamchatka, didn't have a happy history. We were living in a democratic government, but with impunity for the criminals. Carlos Saul Menem, who was the president at the time, he passed through decrees impunity for all the genocidal army and people from Argentina. So it was really a very despairing time. There was no justice, there was no hope of justice in that context. So I knew I couldn't have a happy ending a la Dickens. But what I tried to do was to place some hope in Harry, in the main character of the story. We know he's going to lose his parents, but we also hope that he's going to survive to all that pain and to reach something akin to happiness in his life. The real world is not giving him answers at the time, but at least in his soul he's not broken. He can put all the pieces of his soul together, and at the end of the novel he's whole again, and he can aspire to reach some kind of happiness. Fortunately, in real life, after that in Argentina, with Nestor Kirchner, who was the president at the time, he annulled all these laws of impunity. And during the last 10 years, we have begun again taking to trial all the criminals of the dictatorship. So now we are really near a happy ending.
Aquarium is the most recent work in your career as a novelist, the Odyssey of contemporary Ulysses. What moved you to write this story? What were you looking for in Israel?
I went to Israel to work as a journalist, to write about the Second Intifada, this conflict that blew between the Palestinian people and the Israeli government. I'm talking about violence because the conflict still exists, still lingers. But what I was looking for in a way was, and I was looking for material for a novel. That was the real reason that I went to Israel. I had an idea for a novel that I wanted to write that had a Palestinian character, and I told that story to a friend of mine, and a Spanish journalist, and I told her, oh, someday, and I want to go to Israel and Palestine because I want to do research, because I don't want to imagine this character only reading books or consulting Google or Wikipedia. Uh, so I told her that, and some months after the Intifada happened, and she offered me, okay, let's trade. If you want, I'll send you to Israel and Palestine to write a piece, an article on the Second Intifada for my magazine. And in the meantime, you can do the research you wanted for your novel. The thing was, what happened to me during the Second Intifada, the things I saw, the things I experienced during that time were so intense and so moving that I never got to write that original story that I wanted to write, and I wrote Aquarium instead, because there's much of my experience that's put into an aquarium. But on the other hand, it wasn't. My intention was not to write a novel about the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. What troubled me at the time was the violence that I was seeing in my own country. Because, and I was talking to you about the prior violence, the violence of the dictatorship, that was one. But at the time in Argentina, there was a huge economical crisis. There were the whole generation that had no future. The same mechanism of violence began to work again. And now, during the 70s, the younger people were suspected, were considered dangerous because they had political ideas that were deemed dangerous. During the 90s, they were thought as dangerous because they were poor. And they lived in need, and sometimes they, I don't know, got high on drugs, and sometimes they robbed people, and sometimes they killed people because they were out of their minds. And so once again, history was repeating, and in Argentina the younger people were considered dangerous, and was the subject of real violence through the police. And I wanted to think about this intolerance, and about this streak of intolerance that is so strong in modern history in Argentina. And in that way, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict gave me kind of a perfect backdrop, because that's what you have. You have people that live together because Israel is like that. And Palestinians are their neighbors, and they understand each other, even though they say they don't understand the language. But there's part of them that chooses not to understand their own neighbors, and that chooses to deny their neighbors the essential needs of life. So it was. But that's the way that I think fiction works for me. I use it to get answers to some questions that don't let me sleep well at night. So it's the way I used to think, and with some, in the best of cases, with some profundity. And that's what led me to that story in particular. That's what I wanted to reflect, to think about.
We can say that there are similarities between Israel of Aquarium and the Argentina of Kamchatka. But in your books, although all the violence, you still find a place for a love stories between people who speak different languages, or for an aquarium or temple of memories, for childhood games. In short, we can say that in your novels there is still a place for hope.
Yes, of course. That's the only way I know to live. I am hopeful. against all odds. But I know if you read the papers every day or when you watch TV, the newscasts, you always find reasons for despair because you said, how can this happen? We have no future. But at the same time, there's something that blooms that make you reconsider and say, oh, we are not that bad, and we have improved through history very faithfully, with much violence, but in many ways we have improved. I don't know, we live better than we lived 1 century ago, 2 centuries ago. So I am hopeful. I have children, I have my family, and I need to think that I'm going to do my part for this world to be a better place to live in. But this same Spanish friend that was the one that sent me to Israel and Palestine to write this article, told me once, why there's always children in your stories. She had reason. There are always children in my stories, and I think they are the embodiment of hope for me. Their resilience, the children can endure the most terrible things and still live and be happy. When we as grown-up, when we break up in one way or another, we find it more difficult to. But the children always find an excuse to play. Even if you see all the documentaries on the Second World War, and they show you on the city bombed and all the rubble around, and the very kids who have lost their homes, they are playing amongst the rubble, and oh, a piece of metal, this can be a bridge. Oh, look at this stone. This stone looks like I don't know, like a fortress or a tank. And they always, the drive, the energy of life is so huge in them that I tend to identify. I always need a child in my stories because I always need hope in my stories.
You will agree with what Lilian Gish says in The Night of the Hunter, that children are humanity's strongest.
See, they are our strongest part, and even as grown-ups. At the darkest times, we always, in a way, crawl back to our happy memories that always have to do with our childhood, with our dreams, with the dreams we developed back then. And I think, we grow up in stages, but there's always a child inside us. And if we are going to survive, it's going to be because we are appealing to that side of us, who's the best side, the sunnier side, the joyful side, and not the bitter side, the selfish side that has to do with us as grown-ups.